What is up, guys? It is Craig here, and welcome back to episode 3 of Fascinating Chess Positions. And today, we're going to look at another one of my games. Actually, it's kind of interesting how all the positions I've shown you, we've been black so far. I think this is just a coincidence, basically. Um, I have a lot of strong wins, very good wins with black. Actually, even for like some future episodes that I'm thinking of, I came up with some very great deep plans in game when I was black. Kind of just a coincidence. Like for sure, I'll be showing some positions from the white side as well, from games I've played or openings I've looked at. But this is a game that I played 4 years ago against Grandmaster Magesh Panchanathan, very strong Grandmaster. He actually has the same alma mater as me, UT Dallas. Um, very nice guy. Can only say positive things about the guy. He has, I think, wife, kids, job, family, super normal guy. Was a pleasure to play him. And here he is white as a grandmaster playing down against me, who's lower rated, and he has just offered me a draw, which honestly in game I did not consider for probably longer than like 1 or 2 seconds. Just because you only need to take one look at white's minor pieces to tell you how happy I am with the position. I also have more space. My minor pieces are doing better. But having an advantage and actually converting it are two different things. And actually, here's where I took my longest think of the game. And actually, this tournament that I played in was the tournament where I scored my second Grandmaster norm. And this was the first strong win that I had on the way to getting there. And I think this moment right here, this think that I had and the move I came up with, and mostly the plan associated with the move, because this move doesn't really make any sense without the plan associated with it. But this moment was the proudest, I think, or my proudest moment from the tournament where I made a Grandmaster norm. So if you want to pause your video with black and try to figure out where do you want to place your pieces with black? How do you want to make progress, basically? Okay, so I'm assuming you've paused if you wanted to. Here, the way to go is to ask ourselves the three questions. First of all, what is my worst place piece? Where are the weaknesses? And then what does my opponent want to play? What is my opponent's plan? Um, my worst place piece is an interesting one because I suppose it would be this knight, right? Which leads to the intuitive move that a lot of people might think to play, which is knight d7 to get this knight to e5 because we have an advantage over, a grip over the dark squares. And that comes in the form of, a knight being on e5, being able to control the board very well. The problem with something like knight d7, as I quickly realized, though, is that white's not going to simply sit back and do nothing, right? After knight d7, white's going to fight for control over this e5 square. Something like queen e2. And if knight e5, then f4, and all of a sudden, like, my knight's getting kicked out. White might be going e5 in himself, and it's actually not so clear that white's worse at all anymore. G3, bishop g2 might follow up with, in my position, might actually start to be not as great as it was before. Um, so this is something I quickly discarded. And so that actually answers question 2 for us. For if it was white's move, what would white want to do? And the answer is something like queen e2 f4. And at some point maybe improving this bishop with like g3, bishop g2 also. It's like if white had 4 moves, let's say we did nothing for 4 moves, right? Rook e8. Let's say something like g3, rook c8, bishop g2, rook a8, queen e2, rook c8, f4. White would actually be very happy with this position here. Like the position is closed, but still have the 2 bishops. This bishop could reroute to c1, maybe eventually get active on this diagonal somewhere. That's not a diagonal. This diagonal somewhere. And in addition, white has play with a3, b4. This knight on c2 is bad for the moment, but you can see it rerouting at some point to e1, f3, controlling some squares. And if white can achieve something like this, all of a sudden it becomes what's good about black's position. And honestly, probably not much would be the answer. And so we do have to do something about this position. And, you know, it might be a point where like maybe some of you go back and consider the draw offer. This never actually I never actually considered this in game just because like it's easy to be like, oh, like white might have a plan and if I don't come up with a plan I might be worse, but it's simply just like a key for you to basically figure out like how to counter white's plan. Like you know what white wants to do. White wants to play f4 at some point, maybe like g3 bishop g2. And so what can we do about that to secure to I guess like when queen e2 f4 comes, we have a response. And actually one of the first things I thought about was this move h5, which looks pretty dumb. And it does in fact turn out to be a little bit dumb. And the idea is that, for example, like queen e2 h4 f4, I am controlling this like g3 square, and I am preventing g3 bishop g2. And it's actually not so dumb at all. I can play something like g6, knight h5, hop this knight on g3. Bishop is protecting this h4 pawn. My knight is well protected. This f4 pawn is weak. I can start piling on this f4 pawn later. And actually, I think my position is quite good here with black. The only problem I think with h5 is concretely this move e5 simply like picks up the h5 pawn. So like knight d7, queen h5. I might not be like worse here because I think I go g6 and I pick back up this e5 pawn, but it's not exactly the direction that I wanted the game to be going in. And so the next thing I thought about is just like, and this is a typical idea in controlling the dark squares. Like when you want a knight on e5, but this f4 move is a problem, what you want to do is stick a pawn on g5, basically. And so this is immediately what I started to think of. So like, something like knight d7, queen d2, g5. And again, like to someone not very familiar, I guess, with deeper chess thinking, like someone who kind of knows the basics as a beginner, like don't move pawns in front of your king, like king safety is important. Like this move g5 might come as like a very weird move, but it's like really logical. There's I guess this game is like very very standard for anyone who's like ever like looked at chess seriously before, but there is a famous um Fischer Larson game, which I'm googling right now. G4 idea. I'm going to try pulling this up. Oh, this is absolutely not it. Fischer Larson Hedgehog King H1 Rook G1 G4. This might be it. I hope. I hope. Beautiful. All right. So in this position here, this is a totally different game, but the idea is like slightly inspired from this game. Very similar. So like this knight here wants to come to e4, but the problem is like black's always gonna have this move f5. I can't draw arrows on this board. Sorry guys. Black's always gonna have this move f5 kicking the knight out. So what Fischer wants to do is he wants to get this pawn on g4 solidified to kind of give this knight an outpost on e4. And so these next two moves, king h1, rook g1, and g4, are just the culmination of his idea, like sticking this knight on e4, making sure that this f5 break isn't ever going anywhere. And the kingside attack that ensues is kind of just like it wasn't the purpose of king h1 rook g1 g4, but it's kind of just like an after effect of now that I have my knight on e4, my pieces are placed very well. My pieces are placed so well actually that I have the right to go for a kingside attack. And he eventually ends up getting a lot of pressure on the king, even getting like this knight to f5. And eventually he gets this g5 move in, and basically black's king gets in a lot of trouble. And strategically, the point is like this rook g king h1 rook g1 g4 idea worked out very very well. And this is the game that came into my mind when I reached this position. And so the next move, so like I first thought about h5. So actually, in order. Like the first move I thought about was knight d7, just like the most natural moving looking move. Then I realized I had to go deeper in the position. Queen e2 f4 is what white wanted. So then I thought about this move h5, rejected it because of this move e5. And then the next move I thought about, which is kind of funny just because I'm breaking every rule known to beginners, just like pushing all the pawns in front of my king, was this move g5. And g5 is perfectly fine. Um, I just figured after queen g3, like I'm maybe after like knight d7, white could play f4, something. This is something I don't necessarily have to deal with. And so I played this move king h8 first, which I give a big exclamation mark in my notes. And basically, when I played this move king h8, I had an idea for all of my pieces. So just like Fischer did, I wanted to go king h8, rook g8, g5, solidifying this e5 square for my knight. And eventually, like all of my pieces will have a square. Like this knight is actually not necessarily so bad on f6, just because the other knight will be coming to e5, so I don't actually need to double load the square with both of my knights. And so in terms of having a square for all of my pieces, this knight will go to e5. This knight can stay on f6. I want rook g8, g5. I can put this queen on c7 or d6 just to control more of the long diagonal. This rook will go to g7 or g6, allowing this rook to double. And eventually, this pawn on g5 might start launching a kingside attack. And when I played king h8, I had all of these ideas already in mind. And the way that the game turned out, it's very hard to like specify or pinpoint a mistake that white ended up making. But regardless, the position quickly went downhill for white. And not only did it go downhill, but the remaining moves were extremely easy for me to play. So white goes g3, continuing with his idea of bishop g2. I have no idea if he saw my idea of g5 yet, but I mean, this move on its own, king h8, it's not a move that you play without an idea. And I'm sure when I played king h8, he kind of like suspected my idea. He didn't think I just played it for no reason. And by the way, I just want to point out this move king h8 seems just like kind of some deep strategic move, but I'm very happy that it is one of the top engine moves. It is the top engine move. Like knight d7 exists, but you're kind of playing without a plan. And it on knight d7, if you can see like later on, it does want this g5 move. This g5 move is in every line. You can play g5 first. You can play king h8 first. It doesn't really matter. But the key move is playing g5 at some point. So the game continued. King h8, g3, g5. Bishop c1, attacking this g5 pawn. Knight e5, hitting the queen with tempo. Queen d1, rook g8. So far, I've gotten these pieces in place. Bishop e2, just trying to stop this g4 knight f3, which I was kind of threatening here. I might go g4 with the idea of knight f3. Rook g7, getting ready to double the rooks after I move my queen. By the way, all these moves are very easy for me to play. And notice that f4 is not particularly possible just because gf4 opens the king side. White can take back bishop f4, but after bishop d6, the dark squares are severely weakened. This g3 pawn is either going to fall or is going to have to move to g4, after which, like, all of the dark squares in white's position will be extremely vulnerable, and it should not be too hard to win the game from there. At g6, like jumping into f4, stuff like that. So rook g7, rook f1, queen c7. Again, now this queen is in prime position, exactly where I want it. And the last piece, rook g8. And this is the dream position that I wanted when I thought about this move, king h8, 6 or 7 moves back. And honestly, it's very hard to really pinpoint like a move in the last 6 moves where white could have really played better, like a specific move that is just like that was a mistake. White didn't really make any mistakes. Like white has less space, and he managed to kind of maneuver his pieces sort of around to the defense. But even still, white plays a3, which kind of looks like a non-move, but it's very clever in terms of trying to defend along the second rank with this rook. But I am ready with a tactical answer, which is I play this move g4, which it still does secure the knight on e5, just because f4 will still not be possible. So white goes h4. Otherwise, after hg4, um, Probably knight FG4. I can also go knight EG4 actually. Like I'm just crashing through on F2 and queen takes G3. And this is going to be mate soon. I assume on bishop F4 I can like at least take and like knight E3, take the queen, maybe rook G6 and H6 is going to be mate. Um Trying to look for any cooler mates here. They might exist, honestly. I was just looking at something like knight takes f2 check, king takes f2, knight e4, d4, bishop h4, king f3, rook g3, king f2, rook d3 mate, which I just calculated on the spot, so it might be right, might not be right. Knight e4, there is this move, king f3. This is kind of like a cool calculation for exercise for me now. There's like rook g3, king e4, and just rook e3 is mate. No need for f5 stuff. So yeah, honestly, knight f2 might work. So that's just like something that could happen. Sample line of hg4. Just kind of a cool queen sack line that I calculated. G4, h4, and this move knight h5. And I had already intended my next move when I played this, but after rook a2, I had to calculate for another 10, 15 minutes just to make sure. And if you want to stop the video again, um, yeah, feel free to pause and try to find black to move what to do. And so from afar, I had seen bishop h4, gh4, knight f3, check. White is forced to take, otherwise queen h2 mate next move. And, if he takes with the knight, then like gf3, this is clearly mate. So bishop f3, gf3, king h1. And now it gets not the easiest, because if I go rook g2, threatening queen h2 mate, after knight takes f3, I really don't have a great follow-up. Like, h2 is defended, and where is my mate? And if I don't have a mate, then I'm simply done a piece. So if you wanted to pause your video again, this is the move I had to absolutely see in advance before I played bishop h4. Otherwise, white's kind of just slightly better here. And that move is rook g3, threatening rook h3 mate. And so the only way to stop that is, well, there's two ways to stop it actually. The critical way, of course, is f takes g3. But after knight takes g3 check, king g1, knight e2 check. So same deal if king h2, either knight e2 or knight f1 check is just like double check it. Like it's going to be mate soon. Or king g1, knight e2, king h1, queen g3. Queen comes in. I'm threatening queen h3 mate. I'm threatening uh yeah, honestly just queen h3 mate, queen h4 mate. And if rook e2 takes, we have check and rook drops with mate, which is again something that I had to see from way back here before taking on h4. But everything's kind of forced, so it really isn't so hard to calculate rook g3. And the only other way to keep the game going is queen takes f3, giving up the queen, after which rook f3, knight f3. We are just up a queen for a rook and a bishop. After knight f4, like we are just getting this pawn. Black is completely winning. And I made the conversion in game harder than it should have been, but I did end up winning the game. And so this is one of my prouder moments from the tournament. Hope you guys enjoyed, and see you next time for the next video.